When it comes to NBA basketball, now more than ever, players are putting up ridiculously impressive statistical averages, on some occasions never before seen. This explosion in production is partially a result of the change in style of play in the league, with more emphasis being on spacing the floor than ever, opening things up for isolation scorers, shooters, and cutters more than ever before. With these adjustments, combined with the pace of play and unprecedented usage rates from some superstar players are averaging numbers comparable to all-time greats. But the thing is that while several players are justifiably all-stars who contribute to winning games at a high level, there are also several examples of players who are doing this, but not really correlating it to team success. This brings us to the topic of today's video, where we'll be discussing 8 players in particular who throughout their careers have put up some monster numbers, but the actual impact they bring to winning basketball games isn't on the same level. Also, I didn't include players that were either rookies or second-year players because they don't have a big enough sample size yet to judge, but the players I do mention have all played at least 4 seasons. Before we start, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as all support is very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. Starting things off with the first empty stat all-star, we'll discuss Julius Randle of the New York Knicks. Randle's career started a bit slow while in Los Angeles, but starting in his last season in LA, continuing last season in New Orleans, and now this year in New York, he's been putting up some very strong numbers on a nightly basis, or at least it seems that way. Last year he averaged about 21 points and 9 rebounds per game, and this year he's averaging about 20 points and 10 rebounds, which definitely looks all-star-esque, but the reality is that when you watch him play on a consistent basis, you realize that the way he goes about getting these numbers can actually be harmful to the team at times. One of Randle's biggest assets is his strength, and the combination of that and his crafty handling ability for a power forward result in him using bully ball to his advantage, but when doing this, he tends to just put his head down with determination to get to the rim whether or not the opportunity is there. He struggles with shot selection, can tend to be inefficient, and can honestly seem a bit selfish at times as a player. He's never contributed to a team that has made the playoffs, and in the role he's currently in, that likely won't be changing anytime soon. The next empty stat all-star up for discussion is an obvious one, being Andrew Wiggins. At this point, it just seems repetitive to talk about Andrew Wiggins in this light because it's the only thing anyone ever says about him, but you can't really deny that he belongs in a video like this. Since he entered the league with unworldly hype, his scoring numbers in a vacuum have been objectively impressive. He's averaged over 20 points per game in 3 of the 5 seasons he's played, which again isn't bad by any means. However, he too has done so for one of the worst teams in the league in that span, and in almost every other aspect of the game, he's below average. He struggles mightily on defense, he's not much of a playmaker, and oftentimes ruins the flow of the offense by ball stopping and dribbling his way into a tough shot. Advanced metrics always tend to point to him being a net negative on the court, and the eye test backs that assertion up as well, and realistically, he shouldn't be a main scoring option on a team that wants to win. The next empty stat all-star up for discussion is Zach Lavine of the Chicago Bulls. Lavine's an interesting player to try to judge because he's one of the most exciting and prolific young players we have in the league who scores the ball incredibly well from all 3 levels and is capable of taking and making some very tough shots. He's also above average in his scoring efficiency, so it's not really a fluke compared to Wiggins and Randle, who we discussed previously. However, with all of that being said, his true impact on winning is still very much up in the air. As I said, he is a very good offensive player, and the Bulls' offense is better with him on the court, but his struggles come on the defensive end, where he consistently ranks as one of the league's worst. The team becomes about 10 points worse on defense when he's on the court, and overall, they get outscored by almost 5 more points when he's on the court compared to when he's not. Defense is absolutely an area he needs to improve upon if he wants to lead a team to play meaningful playoff basketball, because through 6 seasons, he has yet to play a playoff game. The next empty stat all-star up for discussion is Hassan Whiteside of the Portland Trail Blazers. Whiteside's career actually started as an easy-to-root-for underdog story, but he quickly became a more controversial figure that fans turned on. What got him onto the court in the first place was his unbelievable ability to block shots and rebound the basketball, having led the league in blocks back in 2016 and led the league in rebounds back in 2017, so you would think that he was a dominant defensive center, right? Well, after the honeymoon phase ended, players began to adjust when they played against him, and he began to get exposed a bit as someone who chases blocks instead of being someone who makes the smart defensive play. His tendency to chase blocks does result in him racking up the numbers, but it also results in him being caught out of position on that end a ton, and as a result, he isn't exactly a very good rim protector. He got forced to the bench in almost every game of the last playoff series he played when he was in Miami back in 2018 because of how much of a liability he proved to be, and overall, his per-game numbers tell a completely different story than his actual impact. The next empty stat all-star up for discussion is Andre Drummond of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Up until a few months ago, Drummond spent his entire career in Detroit, and in these 8 seasons, he has dominated the glass. His rebounding numbers have been truly historic, leading the league 4 times and grabbing about 15 per game over the last 5 years. Rebounding is absolutely an important part of the game of basketball, and securing rebounds ensures that the opponent doesn't get a second opportunity to score. But does a player like Drummond, who grabs a high volume of rebounds, actually impact winning games if he struggles in other key areas? That's where he earns a spot on this list. Drummond scores about 17 points per game, but realistically, he isn't that good of an offensive player. According to Synergy Sports, he's a below-average finisher in the pick and roll, he's been a mediocre at best player throughout his career in the post, and despite teasing fans with extending his range on his jumper every summer, that just hasn't actually become a reality in games. The Pistons made the playoffs only twice in his tenure with the Pistons, and both times they got swept in the first round, and neither time did Drummond exactly impress as a star player. Next up on this list of empty stat all-stars is Karl-Anthony Towns of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Towns has all the potential in the world, and offensively, he's absolutely lived up to the hype that got him to be the #1 pick back in 2015. He's arguably the best offensive big man in the league, whose combination of skilled both down low and around the perimeter make him lethal. He puts up about 26 points and 11 rebounds, which is phenomenal, but a lot of his issues are similar to the ones we discussed with Zach Lavine, but in big man form. Towns has struggled mightily on defense for his entire career, and it's magnified by the fact that the Wolves were over 10 points worse on defense this season with him on the court. The only time the Wolves made the playoffs in his tenure was with Jimmy Butler leading the way, and once Butler left the team, they went right back to the lottery. He should be in the conversation with Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic as best center in the league, but until he lifts the Wolves to start winning some games, he's stuck in a tier below. The next empty stat all-star up for discussion is Kevin Love of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, in no way am I minimizing his role on the Cavaliers teams that made 4 straight finals appearances. However, both before and after his time teamed up with LeBron James, his production has become inflated on lottery teams. In his early Minnesota seasons, he was putting up 26 points and 13 rebounds per game, but the Timberwolves didn't make the playoffs a single time in his 6 seasons there. Now, in these last 2 seasons without LeBron James in Cleveland, the Cavaliers were one of the worst teams in the East. As was demonstrated from 2015 to 2018, his skill set is much more suited to be a third option than a first option, and while he is capable of putting up big numbers as the top guy, it won't lead to team success. And finally, the 8th and final player we'll discuss as an empty stat all-star is Devin Booker of the Phoenix Suns. Booker is more in the category that Karl Towns is in regarding the players in this video, because he absolutely is one of the most talented players in the league at his position, and he hasn't really been put in the best position to succeed by the team around him, but at the same time, the best of the best all-stars elevate the guys around them. Booker's averaged about 26 points and 7 assists per game while scoring the ball very efficiently, and is by no means something that I'm trying to downplay, but the most amount of games the Suns have won in his 5 seasons in the league is 26, which is the amount they have won this year, and not even cracking 30 wins once is just not acceptable. Hopefully, with the development of guys like DeAndre Ayton and Mikal Bridges, the team will be ready to contend for the playoffs soon, but until then, Booker's production lands him in the category of empty stat all-star. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below any more empty stat all-stars you think belong on this list. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.